Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. Fantasy football draft season is here, so it's time to dive into those rankings. So let's take a look at the quarterback position, give you the top 10 guys for 2019 fantasy football drafts. And I know some of you might wait at quarterback. That might be you. But I know a lot of folks also want to enter the season having one of those top 10 guys. There is a lot of value at the position, but here's the top 10 as I see it. Let's start with number 10. We'll go in reverse order. And of course, right there, I have Jared Goff. Last year, for a good chunk of the season, in fact, through the first 11 weeks, this guy was elite. He was the number 2 fantasy quarterback over that span of time. Now, he cooled off at the end of the season, but we know there's lots of upside in that Sean McVay offense. And let's face it, is there a better trio of wide receivers than Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, and Cooper Kupp? I don't think there is in the league, especially for fantasy purposes. Obviously, that's going to help out Jared Goff this season. I know Todd Gurley's injury situation is a little concerning, but you have other guys in the backfield, including rookie Darrell Henderson, who's going to be exciting this year. So there's a lot of upside with Jared Goff. Number 10 for him. At number 9, a guy who's kind of always going to be connected to Jared Goff because of their draft class, and that, of course, is Carson Wentz. Now, we saw elite potential out of Wentz as well. Not last year. He was coming off of that ACL injury, but the year before that injury, Wentz was the number 2 fantasy quarterback as well, and that was over the first 13 weeks of the season. The Eagles are loaded on the offensive side of the ball. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard. I mean, you have just a fleet of skill position guys. There's a lot of upside with Carson Wentz this year, and I think we see a revisit of 2017's fantasy numbers out of Carson Wentz. He hits the ground running this year, and he's going to be big time for fantasy, no doubt about it. Going to number 8, an oldie, but a goodie. Drew Brees. Now, he is not Drew Brees from 10 years ago where we could say, hey, any given season, this guy could throw for 5,000 passing yards. Not in today's Saints offense, but, could Drew Brees give you 4,033 touchdown passes? Absolutely. Michael Thomas locked up with the new contract. Jared Cook in there now, so he has a tight end weapon really for the first time in several seasons. And then, of course, Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. Now, the thing about Brees to be aware of, though, is because of this more run-heavy approach in New Orleans, he's a little up and down through the course of the season, but he's still a top 10 guy. Russell Wilson comes in at number 7. Now, we're just 2 seasons removed from Russell Wilson being the number 1 fantasy quarterback. He wasn't that last year, but he was still a top 10 guy. I mean, he was one of the most efficient red zone passers in the league. He was second in the league in end zone throws. Only Ben Roethlisberger had more end zone throws than Russell Wilson last year. And Ben Roethlisberger had over 200 more passing attempts. So that bodes well for Russell. I mean, yes, this is a run-heavy offense. So the years of him being maybe an elite fantasy quarterback, they might be in the rearview mirror, at least for now. But a guy who can still go out and put up top 10 numbers, absolutely. And, of course, they give him some weapons. The team goes out, drafts DK Metcalf, drafts Gary Jennings, get some guys who can get on the field and give him some speed, take advantage of Russell's arm. So he remains a top 10 guy. He's at number 7. At number 6, maybe the sexiest name in fantasy football drafts at the quarterback position this year, Baker Mayfield. We saw what he was able to do last year, steps in and really puts up a solid fantasy line in his games as a starter. And he has better weapons, right? He gets Odell Beckham Jr. That's exciting. Of course, Jarvis Landry is there. David Njoku with his upside. The backfield is in a good situation. Baker Mayfield trending up. He's going to be a popular guy on Fantasy Draft Day. No doubt about it. Comes in at number 6 for me. Now, who's the top 5? Who do we have ahead of Baker Mayfield? Well, at number 5 was actually last year's number 2 fantasy quarterback, Matt Ryan. Coming off his second 4,900-yard passing season in the last 3 years. So he's almost had 5,000 yards in 2 of the last 3 seasons. And he also, last year was his second place fantasy finish in that span of time. Matt Ryan, that might be his ceiling, but he has a nice high ceiling in that offense. We know Julio Jones obviously is there. Calvin Ridley on the rise. Mo Sanu gives you stability. You have an upside tight end in Austin Hooper. So there's a lot to like there with Matt Ryan as well. Be aware, though, Like I said, last year probably his ceiling, so expect a little bit of regression, but he's still a top 10 guy in one of the better offenses in the league. At number 4, we fully expect a bounce back from Aaron Rodgers. Last year, yeah, it was a rough season. You had the end of the Mike McCarthy era. Rodgers' touchdown numbers were down, but he still had that major connection with Davante Adams. This year, new coaching regime in place. You have Adams obviously still there. You have Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the rise, maybe Geronimo Allison on the rise as well. So better weapons potentially. We'll see, but I do expect a bounce back for Rodgers, and we know he's been one of the best fantasy options over the course of his career. So, hey, it's rare that you don't have to take him as the first or second quarterback off the board. I don't think you do this year, but I don't think he's going to last much further than the fourth quarterback off the board. At number 3, Andrew Luck. Yes, he's dealing with the calf injury. Am I concerned? No. Remember this time last year, he was coming off a much more significant injury, and there were a lot of people who were concerned about that. Luck fell down the board for fantasy purposes, and he ended up returning major dividends when it came to his fantasy production. The first couple weeks weren't anything to write home about, but over the final 13 games of the season, Andrew Luck was a top 10 fantasy quarterback 11 times. 11 out of 13, that is consistency right there. Of course, you have T.Y. Hilton and Eric Ebron coming off that monster season. You have Jack Doyle at tight end. You bring in some wide receiver help in Devin Funchess and Paris Campbell. You have the recipe for success for Andrew Luck this year. At number 2, Deshaun Watson. We know he adds with his legs. He's one of the better running quarterbacks in the NFL. And hey, modern fantasy quarterbacks have to be able to run, to put up those points on the board. It's just so crucial to really keep pace with the rest of the league. But Watson's no slouch with his arm. He's coming off a 4,000-yard passing season. He has those weapons. He has DeAndre Hopkins. He has Will Fuller. He has Kiki QT. I mean, it's a nice set of receivers for Watson there. If there is a guy who could possibly dethrone the guy at number 1, I think you know who that's going to be. It's Watson for me this year. So let's talk about the guy at 1. Surprise, surprise. Patrick Mahomes, after last year's 5,000-yard passing season, 50 touchdown season. Is there anything he can't do? I mean, it's not only that he's good, he has the surrounding talent with Kelsey, with Tyreek Hill, with even Sammy Watkins gives you some upside. And I know, don't roll your eyes. I know Sammy Watkins is inconsistent, but you have major upside with him. You have obviously tons of fantasy juice with Patrick Mahomes, no doubt about it after last season. I expect his numbers to regress a little bit. I don't expect 50 touchdown passes because that is a historically good number. But I still expect in the high 30s, maybe even low 40s out of Patrick Mahomes this season, and I fully expect him to repeat as the number 1 fantasy quarterback. The problem, of course, you're going to have to pay for him on draft day, and he may not be worth the cost. If you have to draft him in the first or second round, that's just too early to draft a quarterback. There's just too much value at the position this year. You want to see all the quarterback rankings and the rest of our rankings, you can check those out and more at PFF.com.